1963. A bullring in Córdoba, Spain. A fighting bull, half a ton of muscle and rage, is charging at full speed. The man standing in its path is not a matador. He is a scientist. He is holding a small radio transmitter. He presses a button. The bull stops. Mid-charge, 3 feet from the man's body, as if its will had simply been switched off. That man was Dr. José Manuel Rodríguez Delgado, and what he had just demonstrated, live, in front of cameras, in front of the world, was the ability to control a living brain by remote signal. A brain with a radio inside it. A brain that could be commanded from the outside. The New York Times put it on the front page. The CIA took notes. And the question that followed, the question that has haunted neuroscience, governments and human rights activists for 60 years, was this. If you can stop a charging bull, what can you do to a human being? This is the story of the man who cracked open the human brain, the government that tried to weaponize what he found, the whistleblowers who nearly died to stop them, and why what they uncovered still matters to every single person alive today. If they did, you can too. Let's go back. Ronda, Spain, 1915. A boy named José is born in a small city in Andalusia. His father is an eye doctor. His future seems mapped. Medicine, patience, a quiet life. History has other plans. 1936. José is 21 years old, a medical student in Madrid, when the Spanish Civil War erupts. He joins the Republican side as a medic. He watches men die from wounds he cannot treat, from pain he cannot stop, from suffering the medicine of his era has no answer for. He survives the war, but the Republicans lose, and José Delgado, brilliant, young, full of questions, is thrown into a concentration camp. 5 months. In a camp run by the side that won. When he walks out, he has lost everything except one obsession. Why does the brain make us suffer? And can it be stopped? Now understand the world he was entering. 1940s medicine for the human mind was catastrophic. Psychiatric patients were being given lobotomies. Literally, a surgeon would insert a metal spike through the eye socket and sweep it through the frontal lobe. The man who invented this procedure won the Nobel Prize in 1949. Electroshock therapy was administered without anesthesia. Patients seized on the table, bit through their tongues, woke up confused and broken. Schizophrenic patients were warehoused in asylums. Epileptics had no reliable treatment. Soldiers returning from World War II with shattered minds were given sedatives and told to rest. The brain was a black box. And then, something changed. 1950. Delgado wins a scholarship to Yale University, Department of Physiology, the most prestigious neuroscience institution in America. He arrives with a question that everyone else considers impossible. What if we could reach inside the brain, directly, and change what it does? Not with surgery, not with drugs, with electricity, with radio, with signal. His colleagues thought he was brilliant. Some thought he was dangerous. They were both right. And here is where the second crisis begins. Because while Delgado was asking how to heal the brain, someone else was asking how to destroy it. 1953, Washington, D.C., deep inside the Central Intelligence Agency. CIA Director Alan Dulles has approved a classified program. Its code name, MKUltra. The Cold War is at its peak. American soldiers are returning from Korea with broken minds. The CIA believes, with growing panic, that the Soviets have cracked something. Brainwashing, mind control, a way to turn a man's own brain against him. New evil seen in brainwashing versus Western psychiatry. The CIA is terrified, and terrified governments do terrifying things. MKUltra's official charter states its goal clearly: to develop, and I am quoting directly from declassified documents, chemical, biological, and radiological materials capable of employment in clandestine operations to control human behavior. 149 sub-projects, 80 universities, hospitals, and institutions, unwitting American citizens, drugged, shocked, isolated, manipulated, without their knowledge, without their consent. At least one man died, a scientist named Frank Olson, army researcher, father of 3, thrown from a hotel window 10 days after being secretly dosed with LSD by his own government. They called it a suicide. His family called it something else. 2 crises running in parallel. A scientist at Yale asking how to heal, a government in Washington asking how to control. And the same technology sits at the intersection of both. Before we meet what José Delgado discovered in that Yale laboratory, if this story is landing for you the way it landed for me when I first uncovered it, hit that subscribe button right now. Every week on the History Disruptors, we bring you another story where documented history is stranger, darker, and more important than anything you were taught in school. If they did, you can too. Now, let's go inside the laboratory. New Haven, Connecticut, Yale University, 1950 through 1974. This is where José Delgado does the work that changes everything. His starting point is simple. The brain runs on electrical signals. Neurons fire, patterns emerge, emotions arise from specific regions. What if you could reach those regions directly and change the signal? He starts with cats, then monkeys, then chimpanzees. He implants tiny electrodes, thinner than a human hair, into precise locations in the brain. He stimulates those locations with mild electrical pulses. And the results are extraordinary. He stimulates the motor cortex. A monkey's arm raises, involuntarily, against its will. He stimulates the amygdala. Fear erupts, then stops, like a light switch. He stimulates the pleasure centers. Animals become calm, docile, unafraid. Then he makes the invention that changes everything. The Stimoceiver. A device smaller than a $50 coin, part brain stimulator, part radio receiver, part EEG recorder. It could be implanted in a living brain, and then communicated with wirelessly. No wires, no laboratory bench, no restrictions on movement. The subject, animal or human, could walk freely, live normally, and the device inside their skull could receive a signal from across a room, or across a building. Delgado himself said, "We have already established radio contact with space. It is now time to establish radio contact with the human brain." In 1963, He tests the Stimoceiver on a fighting bull. The bull charges. Delgado presses a button. The bull stops, 3 feet from his body. Turns aside. The footage runs on Spanish television. The New York Times runs it on the front page. The world sees it. And the wrong people start paying very close attention. But here is what the headlines missed. Here is what gets buried in the drama of the bull and the button. Delgado was not trying to build a weapon. He was trying to heal. He implanted Stimocievers in human patients at a hospital in Rhode Island. The patients he chose were, in his own words, desperately ill patients whose disorders had resisted all previous treatments. Schizophrenics, epileptics, people whose suffering had no other answer. And the results, in some cases, were remarkable. A woman suffering violent seizures. Her Stimoceiver detects the brain signature that precedes an attack. It sends a countersignal. The seizure never arrives. A patient in chronic psychotic distress. Stimulation of specific regions brings temporary relief, calm, clarity. A window. Delgado published 134 peer-reviewed papers. He wrote a book, Physical Control of the Mind, that laid out his vision with complete transparency. His vision was called a psycho-civilized society. A world where brain stimulation could reduce violence, end suffering, eliminate the neurological roots of aggression and panic. He was not hiding. He was not secretive. He put everything in print, in academic journals, for anyone to read. That transparency would almost destroy him, because MKUltra was running in the shadows. And when Congress started asking questions about mind control in the early 1970s, Delgado's name was in the same conversation. Not because he had worked with the CIA, not because he had done anything covert, but because a libertarian psychiatrist, testifying before Congress, pulled quotes from Delgado's book out of context, weaponized his own words against him. The public conflated the healer and the program. The man who wanted to end suffering got painted as the architect of control. 1974. Congress is closing in on MKUltra. Hearings are being called. Delgado, brilliant, published, decorated, leaves Yale. Returns to Spain, largely erased from American scientific history. He dies in 2011, in San Diego, unheralded. While across the world, the program that had terrified Congress is now being exposed. Because someone, several someones, refused to let it stay buried. And what they uncovered would shake the United States government to its foundation. 1973. Washington, D.C. CIA. Director Richard Helms knows the walls are closing in. Watergate. Congressional investigations. A country that is finally asking hard questions about what its government has been doing in the dark. Helms makes a decision. He orders all MKUltra files destroyed. Boxes and boxes of documents. 20 years of experiments. The names of unwitting subjects. The full scope of what was done. Burned. He believes he has erased the history. He is wrong. Because somewhere in a government records building outside Washington, in a box that was misfiled under financial records, 20,000 MKUltra documents survive the purge. 20,000. 1975. The Church Committee, named for Senator Frank Church, begins investigating CIA abuses. They find fragments, enough to know something happened, not enough to prove it. They need the files. The CIA says the files are gone. 1977. A journalist files a Freedom of Information Act request. A government archivist goes looking. Finds the box. 20,000 documents that were never supposed to exist again. Senate hearing. August 3rd, 1977. CIA Director Stansfield Turner sits before Congress. He testifies that he is, his word, horrified by what the documents reveal. What they reveal is this: 149 sub-projects, 30 universities, hospitals, prisons, unwitting American citizens dosed with LSD, subjected to electroshock, isolated in sensory deprivation chambers, hypnotized, all in the search for a way to control the human mind. Testing on unwitting civilians had begun in 1955. The CIA's own Inspector General had noted in 1957, and I am quoting, "The knowledge that the agency is engaging in unethical and illicit activities would have serious repercussions in political and diplomatic circles." They knew. They knew it was wrong. They did it anyway. For 20 years. Senator Ted Kennedy on the Senate floor. The deputy director of the CIA revealed that over 30 universities and institutions were involved in extensive testing and experimentation, which included covert drug tests on unwitting citizens at all social levels, high and low. At all social levels. Nobody was exempt. Nobody knew. Nobody consented. But here is where the disruption becomes the solution. Because the exposure of MKUltra did something permanent, something that cannot be undone. It created the modern framework of human research ethics. 1976. President Gerald Ford signs the first executive order on intelligence activities, explicitly banning experimentation on human subjects without informed written consent. 1979. The Belmont Report is published, the ethical foundation for all human research that exists today. Informed consent, respect for persons, justice, was built in direct response to what MKUltra exposed. And Delgado's technology, the Stimoceiver, the device that had terrified a generation, it did not disappear. It evolved. Today, deep brain stimulation, a direct descendant of Delgado's work, is used to treat over 200,000 people with Parkinson's disease. Patients who could not lift a cup of water, who shook so badly they could not speak. Hold still. Walk. Smile. Because of a technology born in that Yale laboratory. The same technology that terrified the world, in the right hands, with the right ethics, with consent, gives people their lives back. I want you to pause for a moment. Think about that. The same signal, the same basic principle, can destroy freedom or restore it, can silence a human being or silence their suffering. The difference is not the technology. The difference is who controls it, and whether you know it exists. That's what the Church Committee gave us. That's what those 20,000 surviving documents gave us. Awareness. Drop a comment right now. Tell me, what do you think is the most important discovery this episode gave you? Because I want to know what's landing for you. And maybe your comment becomes the next episode. Now, let's talk about what this means for you today. So what do we learn from José Delgado? From MKUltra? From the scientists and senators and journalists who refuse to let this story stay buried? 4 lessons. And every single one of them changes how you move through the world right now. Lesson 1. The tool is not the intention. Delgado built the Stimoceiver to heal. MKUltra tried to weaponize the same science. Deep brain stimulation uses the same principles to restore movement to Parkinson's patients. Same technology, completely different outcomes. Whatever you are building right now, your business, your creative work, your ideas, the tool does not determine the outcome. The intention behind it does, and the oversight around it. You are not responsible for every way your work can be misused. You are responsible for being honest about the risks and fighting to keep the right people in the room. Lesson 2. Transparency is the only real protection. MKUltra survived for 20 years because it operated in secret. The moment it was exposed, it ended. Not because the technology disappeared, but because the public could now see it, judge it, and demand accountability for it. In your own life, the things you are most afraid to name are the things that have the most power over you. The moment you bring them into the light, you change the dynamic. Every time. Delgado was destroyed by secrecy, not his own, but the secrecy of the people who co-opted his work. The lesson is, make your work visible, make your intentions clear, build in public when you can. Because the darkness only works when no one is watching. Lesson 3. Your cognitive liberty is worth fighting for. The neurorights movement exists because scientists in the 21st century looked at what neural technology can now do and said, we need laws. Right now, before it is too late. Brain-computer interfaces, neurofeedback, AI-powered emotional tracking, algorithms that can predict your behavior before you know what you are going to do. The technology Delgado sketched in 1963 has become a trillion-dollar industry in 2026. And the fight for your right to mental privacy, your right to think thoughts no one can read, to feel emotions no system can harvest, is the defining civil rights battle of your generation. You do not need to be a neuroscientist to be part of this fight. You need to be informed. You need to know what the tools can do. You need to ask who owns the data that comes out of any device you put near your brain. Because awareness is the antidote. It always has been. Lesson 4. The disruptors who force the truth into the light change everything. Seymour Hersh wrote the story. Frank Church held the hearings. A budget clerk filed papers in the wrong cabinet and accidentally saved 20,000 documents from destruction. Raphael Yuste started a foundation that convinced a country to rewrite its constitution. None of them had to do what they did. They did it because the alternative, silence, complicity, looking away, was worse than the risk. History is not made by the powerful alone. It is made by the people who refuse to pretend that what is wrong is acceptable. By the ones who file the FOIA request, who ask the uncomfortable question, who stand in the bull ring not to show off, but to prove that the impossible is possible. You have information that someone else needs. You have a perspective that would change someone's life if they heard it. You have a voice that has been quieted by the fear of being misunderstood. Delgado was misunderstood for 50 years, and the technology he built is saving lives right now. How many people are waiting for what you know? This is the History Disruptors. Every Sunday, we bring you another story of how humans faced impossible crises and found breakthrough solutions when the world told them to stop. Because history is not just about the past. It is a blueprint for your future. José Delgado survived a civil war. He survived a concentration camp. He rebuilt his career from nothing, twice. He stood in a bull ring with a charging bull and a radio box, with no armor and no certainty, and proved something the world said was impossible. And then he watched his life's work turned into something he never intended. He was called a madman, a villain, an architect of totalitarian control. He went into exile. Frank Church and his committee refused to let the truth stay buried. A journalist filed a story that changed the law. A budget clerk misfiled 7 boxes and changed history. And the technology Delgado gave the world, born in a Spanish refugee's determination to heal, is now alive in the hands of 200,000 patients who can walk, who can speak, who can live, because of what he refused to give up on. They all faced rejection. They all faced the machinery of power turning against them. They all faced moments when the easy choice was silence. They didn't choose silence. If they did, you can too. We need a program of psychosurgery and political control of our society. The purpose is physical control of the mind. Those words were not written by José Delgado. They were written by one of his colleagues and attributed to him for decades. What Delgado actually wrote, what he spent his final years trying to reclaim, was this: the human brain is the most complex structure in the known universe. It deserves to be treated with the greatest possible care, the greatest possible honesty, and the greatest possible respect. José Delgado, 1915 to 2011. Neuroscientist, healer, disruptor, and the man who started, without knowing it, the fight for your mind.